Interwebs. It's Philip and Andrew Serious.
This
back
is only
again.
going to be posted on the dark web.
Okay. Only on the dark web. But
You-
YouTube,
or-
too. And YouTube.
yeah.
Okay. Welcome back. My name is Philip Serious. This is my brother Andrew Serious. And today we're going to talk about the difference between in-house management or managing yourself, or what Andrew likes to call outhouse management, which is someone else managing for you, which is a fun little jab at property managers. It is a difficult industry. There are definitely good third-party managers, but there are a lot of terrible stories that we have heard of and even experienced.
There are a lot of good third-party managers. There's a lot of bad third-party managers. But to be fair, there are a lot of good self-managers and
Correct.
a lot of bad ones as well.
Yes. So,
Which
Andrew,
we'll get into.
what are some of the benefits of choosing to manage yourself, would you say?
Managing yourself, I mean, the first and obvious one is that you save money. Average property managers charge for if they don't have on-site management, if it's off-site management like houses, small multifamilies, we're talking about generally 10% of all income collected. Plus, they usually take all the late fees, which is interesting. Like they don't screen well enough, so you get a tenant who can't pay their rent on time, and they'll just take those late fees too. And they also take the first month's rent whenever they have a new tenant. So you're paying a lot to your property manager. That is the first thing, and you pocket all of that. The unfortunate part is, time is money, money is time. So you save money doing it in-house. When you're doing an outhouse, you save time, and you don't. I mean,
So-
it's not time free. We'll get more into this later. You can't just throw it over to somebody and do nothing. But you also, I mean, you don't have to show the properties. You don't have to do. I mean, it depends on how much you do. I know guys who
You don't have to take
do the maintenance themselves.
Yeah,
there's
the
different
midnight-
levels of in-house management.
the midnight maintenance call. If you have a third-party
Yeah.
management company, they're the ones taking.
Don't have to take the calls. Don't have to show the properties. Don't have to deal with angry tenants because maintenance not being done. You don't have to. Some in-house managers do the maintenance themselves. I have a friend up in Poughkeepsie who does the maintenance himself, does everything. So you don't have to do those things. But, of course, it's going to cost you not to do those things.
I mean, another aspect, like we have on our board here, is you get more control when you do in-house management. This is one of the big reasons why we decided to do our own management. We built our own management company as we got to a certain size, but basically you get more control in the sense that nobody's going to care about these properties as much as we do.
Yeah.
A third-party manager, they might be great. They might, have more knowledge than you, so they could even do better than you because of their knowledge and experience. But it's hard for them to care about it more when it's your money and your asset and stuff
Yes,
like that.
and
So you have control over how that process
I mean,
works.
our company, Stewardship Properties, it's our slogan is serving people and their housing needs. And you can't really control that when you outsource it to a third-party property manager. You can't to a degree. If they suck, you can move on to another one. You can yell at them to maintain better standards, but you've sort of put that into somebody else's hands. And so we wanted to control that. We wanted to control the process. There are risks here. You need to learn fair housing.
Yes.
If your property manager, assuming you don't tell them to do this, but it somehow breaks the law, they're the ones responsible. If you don't know about it, you should make sure that they're not doing that. But if they do, they're responsible. But if you are discriminating or accidentally even, let's say somebody gives you a sob story.
There's also just lots of
Yeah.
laws that
Yeah.
you have. There's a lot of
You need
knowledge
to talk
base
to,
that you need to understand.
Yeah, so there's risks that come with that, and I think that goes to one of the other advantages of outsourcing it, and that is they have the infrastructure in place. They have leases, they have applications, they have deposits, they should have policies and systems in place, and we'll do another video on systems sometimes, but it really is a matter of you don't just build all your systems and they're done. Like it's a process. It's a never-ending process. And so you're going to start pretty close to nothing when you're starting with your systems. You can get form leases. You can have a lawyer write a lease up for you. You can get form applications from like LegalZoom and other websites like that. But you don't have all those things in place. You don't have procedures in place. You need to start putting those in place, and it's going to take time, and it's going to be kind of exhausting, both in terms of like one, just putting them together, but also in terms of like, well, somebody yells at you, you don't have a policy for it, you've got to on the fly create one and then go from there. And so that is just something that is probably I would consider the biggest advantage of outsourcing.
If you are going to do it yourself, you're going to build up this infrastructure over time. But if you go with a third-party management, if they're any good, at least, they're going to have this day one, which is super helpful, and what they already have. Another reason to manage yourself is to avoid fraud or
and this can be like, fraud might even be a strong statement.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it
could be kickbacks from contractors.
It could be incompetence almost, not knowing what's happening with it.
Now, once you start building out an in-house property management company and employees, and all of a sudden fraud, the possibilities of fraud reintroduces itself, although you're closer to it.
Yes.
So you have a better chance of figuring it out. But, with property manager, they could be taking, kickbacks from contractors. They could be, I've heard of really bad ones. They lease a unit and they don't tell you. So they just pocket all.
And that's just straight fraud. It's I think the key thing to understand is there's so many more levels to that in terms of incompetence or just misaligned incentives.
Yes.
I mean, this is the one that always bothers me with how leasing works or how property management fees work. A lot of property management companies do a base percentage of rent, and they get a full month's rent when they release the property, and that often can be almost a full month's or a full year's worth of the percentage that they're getting. So they're almost incentive to, okay, let's not try to renew people and just re-rent the property if you're going to actually make more money. Or when there's a maintenance call, they make a margin off of the maintenance. So they don't care about spending extra time because it's just your money plus a margin, so they're not trying to save you money. These misaligned incentives can have real issues. It's not exactly fraud. It's just if they don't care or they're not having your best interest, you're going to lose a lot of money based off of incompetence.
Yeah, it's everything from fraud to misaligned incentives to incompetence. Yeah. And so it's not something that you simply avoid it completely on the in-house, because once you've hired employees, or if you use a contractor or something like that,
or if
you have
you're incompetent.
Yeah, if you're incompetent, I mean, you're probably not going to defraud yourself, but you might be incompetent.
Yeah. If you break the law in accident, though, you could, because you don't have that knowledge base up front too. So
one of the things, though, property management is a tough business. If you don't have systems in place, particularly, or you don't put them in place, you're going to burn out. That's like, I've heard 2 years is the average for people who don't manage themselves if they're not putting systems in place. And I mean, you have tenants who are extremely angry at you because, say, something went sideways, maintenance wasn't done right, or maybe they're angry at you for not because of anything you did, but they're behind on their rent for some issue that's going on in their life, and they're outsourcing that anger at you. And then there's also, I mean, people, you make mistakes. There's times you don't know what happened. These headaches are very, very cumbersome. They're not fun. They're like, it's property migraines, we'll call them.
It's what everybody dreads with the idea of owning real estate and renting out properties. It's the 2 a.m. toilet leaking phone call that everybody dreads.
It's much easier talking to a property manager. It's like, it's harder to negotiate straight with somebody and lowball offer them than tell your real estate agent to lowball them, because you don't have to deal with however their reaction is. And the real estate agent can be like, well, I don't do it. So you do get to outsource these headaches and have sort of like when these tough situations come up, you get to talk to somebody who's just like, okay, we're going to go through this situation. What do we do here? That is all. That's the biggest emotional advantage for sure. Mm-hmm. But I think when you kind of round it out, one of the key things about managing yourself is you gain experience. You learn what's important. You learn what does it take to be a good property manager? Even if you hire a property manager down the road, it's easier to know when you're being lied to or when you're being sold a bill of goods when you've done it yourself. We once had an example of a third-party property manager who was saying, like, they don't post on Craigslist because nobody ever responds to those. Now, Craigslist has gone down.
This was years ago.
We'll do a video on advertising, rentals, and leasing and whatnot. Back then, though, and we were like, that doesn't sound right. But we weren't managing this apartment, and we weren't managing this area, and once we finally took it over, they responded to Craigslist ads. And we knew, it didn't sound right, but we would have known it wasn't right if we had managed properties in that area.
Yeah.
And so it's not even just properties in general, specific areas, types of properties, etc. But the gaining experience is definitely a key advantage, even if it just comes to understanding understanding what are the good policies, and when they tell you something, should you just take their word for it, or should you push back on it?
Well, and the experience thing I think is so important because a lot of people think of real estate as a passive investment that's not going to take time, and that's just not true. It just isn't. It's never going to be completely passive.
Unless you're buying a REIT.
Okay, well that's like a stock. I
Yeah.
mean, it's an investment where you get a much better return. We believe, we talked about this in one of our previous videos, you can get a great return. It's a great investment vehicle for a lot of people, but it's not passive like bonds or stocks or things like that would be. It's a much more active investment, even if you get a, as we call an outhouse property management company, because you have to manage the manager. And so this gaining experience of managing yourself is so valuable, because even if you want to use an outside property manager, you have to have that experience yourself. And so which one you choose, I think, really depends on your life situation and what your goals are. And you got to figure out those things. I mean, there's some simple ones. If you're out of state and you're investing in a different city or something, which we don't really recommend, but people have been successful.
We'll do a
with
video
it.
on it. There's certain steps you absolutely need to take.
People have been successful with it,
Yeah.
and so that's going to be real hard to do it yourself. Some people somehow do it themselves. I don't really get that, but generally that's going to be a third-party property management company. I would say, if you are just getting into it, I really recommend doing it yourself if you have the time. Now, if you're totally booked in your schedule, you're working a lot, you have kids, and you don't have any free time, it's not for the faint of heart. I would say the two people we buy properties the most from, distressed assets, are people who are self-managing, who just don't have the time, energy, or money to deal with it, and they're overwhelmed, overworked, and can't handle it. And then third-party property managers who are just really bad. Those are the most distressed assets.
Basically, bad manager.
Yes, on both sides.
Yeah.
And so the single managers, they're too overwhelmed to do it.
There is no universal, this is what you should do. But I have general guidelines for what I generally recommend, and that is, if you're getting started, you're doing a handful, a couple
doing
of them.
A house hack or something
house
like
hacking. That. We'll do a video on that, even though we have no experience in that.
Yeah, a little
kind of. I mean,
I
lived in a basement office, so do you. But I would recommend in-house for that, for sure. If you're doing a couple of them, gain experience. It's a lot less expensive. You're not going to be high on any property manager's list if you have 3 properties. If you have a decent sized portfolio, and that's kind of what you're aiming for, 10, 15, 20, then I think.
Unless you're really doing 20 hours a weekend.
Yeah, unless this is your full-time job.
Yeah.
Unless that's going to be your full-time job. And I have a friend up in New York, not upstate New York, not in Manhattan, but who does that and has a lot of success with it, where he owns like 10 properties, and that's basically his job. If you're going to build your own company, your own real estate company, you're really going for it, kind of what we wanted to do. Then I'd go back to where you're you're not managing yourself now. You're building a management company. Now you have a lot more control. It should be less expensive, at least over the long term, once you get to a certain number of units. But you have a lot more control, and it's the control is really, and the ability to avoid big catastrophic fraud, or just like your units going way so much quicker. Like, if you know something's wrong, you can change it much faster.
Well, one of the big reasons we've decided to do it is we've tried to turn management to a competitive advantage for us. And you can't really do that with a third-party management company, because it's a commodity at that point. So,
which is the last one. If you're a corporation, a hedge fund, whatever, I don't think it's generally worth setting up a property. If you're one of those big, if you're Invitation, if we got some corporate executives from Invitation Homes out there, you should do.
By the way, send me an email.
Yeah, we'll make an offer.
We'll make an
offer.
Anyways,
Invitation Homes owns like 90,000 houses, just in case you're wondering.
So, I mean, it really depends on your individual situation, what your goals are. If real estate is just an investment vehicle to eventually retire on, and it's never going to be your full-time career, I would recommend understanding it yourself, but aiming towards having someone else take on the bulk of the work, because you're just going to get overwhelmed over time. Unless you're going to really turn it into something that you're trying to accomplish and do, I would say keep doing it yourself in that way. But again, everybody's situation is different. Everybody's goals are different. You just have to weigh the pros and the cons and make a decision.
I'd make one last point, which I think is worth a separate video someday. We will get through those.
We'll keep doing these.
If you're going to pick a third-party property manager, you need to manage that manager. Yes. Ask for consistent reports. When something looks amiss, the utilities are high, ask about it. Be a bit of a pest, make sure that they know that if something slips, that you're at least going to get an email, and if it slips big,
and always have a backup option.
Yeah, look, every once in a while, go through your properties. If you're out of state, you should visit from time to time. I probably every 6 months at least, especially early on. And don't be afraid to switch. If they aren't getting the job done and it's not improving, don't be afraid to switch.
I just helped one of my friends find an outhouse property management company. And one of the biggest things that I thought he was doing right is he talked to a bunch of them. I talked to him with them. He found 2 that he liked. He went with one, but he said as soon as this one slips up, I know where I'm going, so they don't have any leeway, and they got to do things right and the way I want them, and I'm not going to let them take advantage of me. And he's going to be looking for how they might take advantage. There's some really nice outhouses out there. They're beautiful. They're great. But
the problem is there are a lot of really nice outhouses.
There's some really,
but some of them are full of shit.
Fair enough.
On that note, let's
why don't you
there.
subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and we don't have all those set up yet, but we do have a YouTube channel. Yeah, so we appreciate you watching, guys. Check out the next one. We'll see you later.